As summer's begun heating up, so have the headlines. The newsbreakers, policy makers, headline shakers. We cover it all from top to toe. Stand by now for Darpan's local news.
Welcome to Darpan's local news. I am Sheetal Walia. In the headlines today, it was the central government and not the four mayors responsible for leaving out the three mayors of Rodney District, Papakura and Franklin District from the original Super Council plan meeting with the Prime Minister. Mayor of Auckland City Dick Hubbard says electrification of Auckland's rail system will be the biggest boost to improving the city's transport network in decades and welcomes ARTA's proposal for rail. Auckland Regional Council members defy ARC leader Mike Lee and seek legislative power to impose a fuel tax to contribute to public transport. But Chairman Mike Lee votes against any move towards a rate for commuter car parking. Drivers looking for short-term off-street parking in the CBD will have an easier time with Auckland City's new parking guidance system. North Shore Mayor George Wood says that the government, instead of building a new waterfront stadium, should look into other options like converting the available North Shore Stadium to a 60,000-seat capacity stadium, while Mayor Dick Hubbard welcomes the government's proposal for a new waterfront stadium. Gladstone Primary School in Mount Albert celebrated the United Nations Food Festival with a term focused around United Nations in a specific country for each class. Now for the news in detail. In the run-up to the earlier failed proposal put forward by the four mayors for a super council, it was the central government and not the four mayors who were responsible for leaving out the three mayors of Rodney District, Papakura and Franklin District from the original meeting between the Prime Minister and the four mayors with regards to one greater council plan. Auckland City Mayor Dick Hubbard, while speaking to Darpan's local news, said that it was the government who showed interest in meeting the four mayors of Auckland, Manukau, Waitakere and North Shore, and that he was not responsible for the omission of three mayors as widely perceived by one and all.
The government just sent us a clear message. It wanted to hear the personal views of the four mayors of Auckland. So it got the personal views.
Of the central government rather than your own?
No, it was central government. They just wanted to hear our views. So we sent our views down, and then they said, well, we want you to make the document that you've prepared for us public, and then everyone can consider it, so we made it public. And now the various councils are formulating their views, and they'll send them to Wellington. It may well be that the government's going to get a whole lot of different views.
Dick Hubbard explained in detail the events that led to the conceiving of a Greater Auckland Council and said he was hopeful the plan would see the light at the end of the tunnel in the not-too-distant future.
There's been some confusion over what's meant by one city. There's actually three different definitions of one city. One of the definitions is that all of the councils in the ARC come together and it's just one big city, everything's thrown in together. And that's the model that's been promoted by Grant Kirby. It's one that I don't agree with. The second model is our one, which you turn around and say you've got one Greater Auckland Council, which is the one voice for Auckland, sets the overall policy, and underneath that you've got cities or boroughs or councils that are the delivery arms. And there could be 7 like there is at the moment, there could be 4, there could be 3. And we have to work through those issues as to how many. And I think Waitakere were very concerned that there might only be 3, and if there was 3, there would probably be south, central and north, and there would be no Waitakere. If there was 4 underneath, then there would be a separate Waitakere. And the Prime Minister has made it plain that she favours the idea where there are councils underneath a Greater Auckland Council that actually reflect local identity, so you can have that West Auckland identity that Waitakere want. And then the third definition of one Auckland is just amalgamation, leave the ARC the same, and just amalgamate the number from 7 councils down to 3 or 4. So if people are a little bit confused, I think, and with all due respect to Waitakere, I think that the Greater Auckland Council, with the delivery arms underneath and a separate West Auckland Waitakere identity, shouldn't actually cause some problems. And we've discussed it at our council, for instance, and some of my councillors have turned around and said our proposal goes too far, and others, councils have turned around and said, well, it doesn't go far enough. So there are divergent views. There is urgency because I think, first of all, the Metro report I don't think can be fully implemented without changes to governance. Secondly, there's Rugby World Cup, and we have to have a structure that makes Rugby World Cup happen. I think there are limitations with the existing structure. Thirdly, we've got elections next year, so we either get something in place before October 2007, or we have to wait to 2010. And then fourthly, we've got a government now that says it's prepared to listen and it's prepared to act. And it's a good time at the moment for governments to act because it's the middle of the election cycle, and once it starts to get close to national elections, they'll tend to keep clear of things like that. So the point I make is that at the moment all the stars are lined up, and if we don't go for it now, it might not happen for another 3, 6 or 10 years. Firstly, in the public, I'm seeing a lot of support for One Auckland. The public out there, the taxi drivers, the dentists, the barbers, the people I talk to in the street, most people support One Auckland in some shape or form. The councillors, there are different opinions there, and it's very hard for us to be objective because when you're in the system and someone suggests we take some of your powers away, it's actually very hard to be objective. So I have a lot of sympathy with all the people that are on the inside trying to give objective advice about something that actually affects their own position. And what we've got to do is constantly remind ourselves that we politicians are there to serve the interests of Auckland. Auckland is not there to serve the interests of us politicians. The worst thing I think could happen would be that the government receives over the next 3 months 10 or 15 or 20 different views. It then turns around and says, well, Auckland can't get its act together, they can't agree, it's all too hard, and we just put it in the too hard basket and we won't do anything. That, in my opinion, would be the worst possible outcome and a travesty of justice.
Auckland Regional Council members defied ARC Mike Lee and decided to seek legislative power to impose a fuel tax to contribute to public transport. But Chairman Mike Lee was on firmer ground when the Council's Finance Committee joined him in voting against any move towards a rate for commuter car parking. The committee decided to ask Council officers to actively pursue a law change allowing a regional fuel tax to help close $700 million public transport gap over 10 years.
On commuter car parks in the city, which I very, very strongly opposed, and which a majority of the other councillors agreed with me. With regard to the petrol tax, fuel tax, I opposed that as well for 2 reasons. One, I don't believe we are satisfied or have satisfied ourselves that we are getting value for money from our present public transport service operations at this stage. And the second reason I opposed it was not targeted to a given project. Had it been targeted, say, as a contingency to help fund a regional contribution to the electrification of the rail network, I would have supported it. However, it didn't. It was too broad brush, and therefore, for those 2 reasons, I had no hesitation to vote against it. I wasn't in the majority, but we live in a democratic organisation.
Mike Lee opposed the regional fuel tax and the car parking levy, saying the council should concentrate on gaining greater cost efficiencies, such as from hefty bus company profits, before dragging more money out of the pockets of ratepayers and the commuting working person. He noted that the council had already asked the government for the right to levy property developers for new public transport capital spending, a matter still being considered by the government.
We tend to be too much focused on the supply side of these questions rather than the cost side, and I believe there is enormous scope to gain cost efficiencies in public transport and in the whole range of local government services in Auckland, and indeed that is what our paper, which we presented successfully to the Mayoral Forum, was essentially all about.
A second proposal for a national stadium built over water near the bottom of Queen Street is under serious government consideration for the 2011 Rugby World Cup. And Mayor of Auckland City, Dick Hubbard, said he welcomed the government's announcement. Plans for a 60,000-seat stadium between Captain Cook and Marsden Wharfs. It will be built on hundreds of piles driven into the seabed to carry the weight of a stadium.
What we have to make sure, though, is that it doesn't unduly interfere with the operation of the wharf. And I don't have the facts and figures available on how it will affect the wharf operations, so I'm not in a position to be able to comment definitively on that. But I think that the government's quite right to look at it as another option.